one of the first runner-up of Amazing Race season one, known for his competitive attitude and ability to get done a ton of roadblocks. Please welcome the ever so cocky but confident Frank.
Hello, how are you, Connor? Hello.
So, so normally I get this started with talking about your casting process, and yours is kind of unique in a sense because you really didn't know what Amazing Race was. So, kind of talk about your casting process, how you found out about the show, and then why did you choose Margarita as your partner?
Yeah, well, it was an interesting situation because, again, as you said, The Amazing Race wasn't even a thing. There was a television commercial that was an open cast call in New York, where we live, that called for the show. I think at the time, the concept was called Global Summer Adventure. So it wasn't even The Amazing Race yet. And it seemed like a pretty good idea. And we saw the open cast call and we figured, well, let's go give it a shot. I mean, we had been going through some relationship issues, and we figured, well, let's give this a shot. Might might help or hurt. So it was pretty good.
So, was the show like what you expected, like going into it, or what did you expect going into it, and then what did it kind of become?
Really had no expectations because they were very good about being quiet about what we were doing. Like we knew we would be traveling around the world, and there would be some asset we'd have for some things, but not to the extent. At least in our season one, there was some really super physically challenging things that we had to do that I think crossed the line of actual health and safety. But I didn't expect it to be that. We didn't have any expectations, so it was pretty wild. Just going everywhere and doing everything and never ever experiencing anything like that in the past, and not without any expectations. So it was crazy.
So going into leg one, like how? Well, first off, I thought it was really funny when the Guidos kept passing you, and you were so pissed, even though you were on the first flight of everything. Like it's like you're still on the first flight, but you're so competitive. So that's funny. But how nervous were you bungee jumping? And then after that, how you had to do the ostrich egg roadblock, which wasn't aired.
Yeah.
Did you actually cook your ostrich egg? Because I spoke to Brenda and Pat and then Karen, and they were like, we actually cooked ours, and a bunch of other people had to eat it raw. So how
Right.
bad were those experiences, or how nervous were you, or just your thoughts?
Yeah. So I grew up in New York City, urban environment. I had been around pretty dangerous situations, but I normally handle myself pretty well. But when I was standing there at that bungee jump, my legs were uncontrollably shaking. I'd never had that experience before, where I felt somewhat calm in my head, but my body was really really showing me how nervous I was. So no matter what I was trying to tell myself, my body was saying something else. So that was really, it was scary. It was something I'd never done before, but it was exhilarating, as you can imagine, after you complete it. And then with regard to the ostrich egg, I tried to cook it, but I realized that was going to take a very long time with the means they gave us to cook it. And as you know, every second is precious. So I ate it raw, and it was really gross. It's the equivalent of 24 eggs,
Yeah,
chicken eggs raw.
told
Yeah,
me.
yeah,
Seemed nasty. So,
yeah.
uh, going into the second leg, you get completely lost for 4 hours because Margarita thinks she finds a sign. Just in general, and I'll get to the other like historical sites like in the coming legs, but as far as like going on the African safari and like going to Victoria Falls and all these other historical sites, like obviously you might not be able to absorb it like at the time, but like what was that like? So you got to go to like this
Oh,
to the world.
it was incredible. I mean, I had never been to sub-Saharan Africa before that. I'd been to Northern Africa. So, and, having African ancestry, that was a real, amazing experience. And then, you know, being in Africa and what you don't see on camera, and, the things you hear and the people speaking, and, people being out and it being dark and there's no street lights, and, you have to be careful because wild animals would actually catch you. Didn't know that hippos are actually the most aggressive animal that kill the most humans down in sub-Saharan Africa. That was new information. But Yeah, it was a really awesome experience because the guy who's the tribal leader who hosted us in his little village, he actually went to Oxford, which I thought was very interesting. He's like this, African tribal leader with very, um, customary clothing, and he was spoke perfect Queen's English, and he was an Oxford grad, so I thought it was very interesting situation. And the safari was really cool. I mean, that's just something that like for me, it was a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So, uh, excuse me. After you go to the first pit stop and you party, which that'll be probably one of my last questions. Like, what were pit stop stories like? If you have any of those, but that'll be one of my
Oh yeah.
last questions. But so after you go on the safari, you go to Paris, you go through the Eiffel, you go on the Eiffel Tower, you climb that, and then you go on the third leg and you travel through a sewer through Paris. So what was it like having a kind of like fun experience? Like you're going up the Eiffel Tower, like obviously you're stressed, but at that point you're at the top of the pack. You're not like pretty much in any danger of going home. But then you have to go through a nasty sewer. And so what was that experience like?
Um, it was interesting. Again, your adrenaline is pumping, so you're running at full speed. And see, again, we did not know the show format, whereas like you're not going home. And at any moment, we felt we could be going home at any moment. Like we felt that there was no room for error, and you just didn't know where other teams were and so forth. So, you're just going as fast as you could. It was like there was a times when it was like really quiet and slow when you're at the pit stop, and other times, and then when the racers were going, we were just going as fast as we could. So running up the Eiffel Tower, I had been to France before and I've been to the Eiffel Tower, but I never ran up the Eiffel Tower. So you can imagine how tired you are when you run up, and then you actually have to do something when you get up to the top, at least to that deck where you can see out. The sewer was something I'd never thought that I would experience, and it was pretty funky. But it wasn't as bad as you would expect. Like I thought it would be, there are a lot more rats and stuff like that, but it wasn't. It wasn't really that bad.
I find it funny that you could get through the sewer easily, but the rats were just the nail in the coffin, which I'll get to that during the India leg because that those legs just looked a nightmare. But uh, after you finish near like the top in the uh, Paris leg, uh, you go to Tunisia, which I would find it funny because a bunch of people, I think including yourself, I'm not really sure, you thought it was Turkey at first. So I wonder what production would have done if you all went to the wrong country.
No, no, I was familiar with Tunisia because I had been to Morocco before, which is a neighboring
Oh,
country. So I was familiar. It was you couldn't really mess it up because we were taking a ferry
yeah.
from France over to Tunisia. So there was one ferry. It's not like you could take ferry to Turkey. I think there may be one, but there wasn't one available at that ferry terminal where we were.
Yeah, so one of my favorite roadblocks, especially in that leg, was like the torch obstacle course thing. Like, how cool is that to do? Just because, like, obviously, like you're stressed and stuff, but I would just want to do that for like fun, just because that seems
Yeah,
really cool. So what was
it
that?
felt like a gladiator movie sort of situation because you're in a Colosseum, which is it's built like the Roman Colosseum, but obviously smaller scale. And you're down there. In my situation, the way they set it up, I found the clue, but I didn't know that you had to get a pole. I don't know if you remember that, but get a pole from another area, and then pull it through. So I actually jumped this fence. I climbed and jumped this fence, which was really difficult to do in the first
Yeah,
place. It was really wobbly and old. And I'm here jumping a fence, and that's kind of my thing. I'm jumping fences all over the place.
which is
Uh,
funny because it's like you could see that, and then it was like you jumping the fence, and then on one side it was like the poles. It's like they're right there.
right, exactly.
Like,
But you know what? But because when I walked up, all I saw was the clues. I didn't keep walking to see the poles. So it was like, oh, okay, I guess this is not as easy as as I expect, so I got to jump the thing. I figured. So
So,
it was funny, but it was a great experience.
once you finish in like the top four, production difficulties screw you over with other teams. You need to depart fifth or whatever. Uh, so after that, you go to the fifth leg, and I think that this was kind of maybe this leg kind of broke you in a way, just because first off, how cool was it going to, not sure if you're a Star Wars fan or something like that, but doing the
Oh, yeah.
roadblock on like the actual like movie set of like Star Wars?
Yeah, that was why I've seen Star Wars, and but I wasn't that aware of it. But then Kevin O'Connor, he mentioned it, and I think Brennan also knew. So they mentioned it. I was like, wow, that is really cool. And then I kind of remember the scene and all that. It was awesome. I mean, going to the Sahara Desert's a scary situation because you get lost out there, and it's unforgiving. It's really hot, and I chose to drive this car, and if you get off of the hard beaten sand, you get stuck in in deep sand. You're really screwed. So there's no tow trucks around or any of that kind of stuff. So it was pretty scary.
So talk about you obviously got lost in the desert. How long were you actually lost for, and how on earth did you find your way, like, to where you were actually going? Because you don't want to pull a Paul and Amy, and they were lost for like hours.
Right.
So how
I
were
may
you?
have been lost probably about an hour. I'd say maybe an hour and a half. Somewhere between an hour and 2 hours, I believe we were lost. And then, again, the desert, you just look in every direction. It's just desert. There's no signs or anything else. And just by sheer luck, I felt, I was driving on the hard packed sand, and I said, well, let me go back the way I came. And then I went back, and then I saw a yellow rock. I said, that's got to be a sign of, where the road is. And that was it. I just started following yellow rocks, and I got to the pit stop. But yeah, it was pretty scary, man.
So after uh, you finally find the camel, your wife or Marguerite has to ride the camel. Did the camel actually spit on you? Because I heard from Karen these
Yeah,
camels were not fun and they started spitting on Lenny and you were near them the entire time. So what was your
yeah.
experience with the camel? Was it nicer to you than their camel?
That was one of those situations where I thought, well, this could really compromise a person's health and well-being and safety, because there was two paths you could take. You could either take, again, the hard packed sand sort of path, which Lenny and Karen went down, but then we were just right behind them, and we didn't know whether we were the last ones, if we were going to get eliminated or whatever. So, and immediately I said, well, we have to go the way the crow flies and then figure out, the straight path, the straight line, not the roundabout way to get there, which was an easier path. So as I try to start walking, the camel starts pulling back at me and starts spitting at me. And so I literally, like with all my might, like pulled on the bit to like get it to comply. Like, I mean, I'm literally like wrestling with this camel. So if you see, and then I had to walk through like really high sand. It's very, very hot. It's 120 degrees. So every time I would step down, it was like the sand would go up to my knee. So I had to walk about a mile like that with 120-degree heat, pulling a non-cooperative camel with a huge backpack on my back. And when I actually got to the pit stop, I mean, we had just beat Lenny and Karen. I thought my heart was going to pop out of my chest. I was just working. I was just so exhausted, so spent. It
Yeah,
was it
well,
was crazy, but the camel was nuts.
did you know about like Paul and Amy being lost? Because I
No,
talked to Karen about it, and she said that she knew, but I was like, especially in season one, not necessarily with you guys, but like with a bunch of teams, like there was like, obviously you didn't win prizes, but there was like a lack of urgency, like to get ahead of like a team at the pit stop. Like you even saw like in the third leg, like Nancy being like, "Oh, I want everyone to hold hands, and we're gonna walk."
yeah, that wasn't me.
And it's like
That wasn't
you
me.
just got to make sure you get ahead on one team. So, like, did you even know that they were lost? You were like, crap, it's us two in the bottom, or like,
No, I didn't know where anyone was. All I know is that we were lost for a while, and I said, holy moly, these people are ahead of us, and we have to beat them. I don't care who else is out there, but we have to beat them, and that's why it was so difficult to get through that part of going through the sand. But I will say this: that Karen may have known because the crews had radios and stuff, so maybe they had overheard that they were looking for a team that was lost. Because I didn't find out, we didn't find out until we were actually at the pit stop, and they were scrambling around trying to look for these folks and like getting helicopters and everything else to try to see if they could find them.
Yeah. So I actually forgot to ask this question, but during the beginning of the race, you formed an alliance with like Joe and Bill and Rob and Brennan because y'all were the top
Short-lived
three.
alliance.
And it's funny that you actually ended up in the final three. But I'm not sure if you initially bonded with them, but who were the teams that you kind of like initially bonded with that maybe we didn't get to see, or like were you more like on your own?
Definitely Kevin and Drew was, I really enjoyed those guys. Like we were from, from the same area, from New York specifically, those two. And then Karen, I became very close with after the fact. Whoa. Karen, I became very close with after the race. But yeah, we kind of did our own thing. We weren't like really too buddy buddy, but once we got towards the end, because Kevin and Drew were still there. Robin Brennan, we were okay. We weren't too cool, but yeah, that was it. Like definitely Joe and Bill. I didn't really have any relationship with them at all. Never really had any conversations with them either.
So so after you finish like fifth or you finish towards the bottom, you have to go to you get moved to location, and then you have to go to you have the airport drama with like Nancy and Bill and Joe. So kind of like what was your whole perspective on that, and how bad was it getting out of the airport? Because I think I saw like you and Margarita talking to people, and I think it was like the 20th of some month, and it was like they had an airport strike, and they were like, the quickest way you can get out is like the 28th because of this airport strike. And I can only imagine like what production was thinking, or
Right,
dear
right,
God, like as far as like a filming schedule. So kind of talk about the airport trauma and what a nightmare that traveling was.
right. Well, we weren't present for the pushing incident at the gate with Joe and Bill and Nancy and company. We weren't there for that because we just wanted to get the first thing out of there. So we ended up catching a flight to London and then a subsequent flight to where we needed to go. So we didn't see that, but being in that airport, see one thing that we didn't realize is they have these like wildcat strikes in Europe and other places all the time. So it's the production crew wasn't really concerned because they knew a strike could last 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, whatever, and then they would resume. So we were I think more panicked, and as you could see, Karen and Lenny and Karen, they just waited a little while, and then they got the next flight directly into Rome, right? So
Yeah.
that was interesting. Whereas everybody else is flying and taking trains and getting out of there as quickly as possible. But if we had sat down and relaxed for a couple of hours, we'd all been in Rome, on a simple direct flight.
Yeah, well, Karen told me that she had some inside information from like, I don't know if it was like the owner of the airport or like the head of the airline. So she had like some connections that nobody knew about when she like ran into him or something like that. So I found that interesting when I interviewed her. But once you get to where's that question? Sorry. Once you get to Rome, how annoying was it just like in general? Like you have to carry the camel, your wife's just sitting on, or Margarita's just sitting on it and relaxing, and then you have to drive the smart car, and she's like this awesome, like, I don't know what you call it, like a sports car, limo, whatever you call this, like cool ass car or whatever. And you're
Right.
just like driving a tiny smart car, and she's just living the high life. So I mean, I guess you're happy for her, but like, how annoyed were you that you kind of got like screwed as far as the road
Super annoyed.
go?
Super annoyed. Super annoyed. I mean, come on. Like, that was probably the most exhilarating experience because I think they drove like 200 miles an hour or something on that road. That would have been like such a rush. But yeah, I was on this in this car that wouldn't go past like 30, 40 miles an hour. I could barely fit in the thing. It was annoying. It really was annoying.
Yeah,
But it's cool, you know. I was happy for her.
my favorite was like the whole Kevin and Drew reaction when they got to the pit stop and how annoyed. Uh, I think it was Drew was like really annoyed with him. He was like, every time I get screwed on these, like this is bullshit. So that was pretty funny. But I also forgot to ask this. Talk about like where the tension started with like Robin Brennan, because we obviously saw like in the Paris leg, like Joe and Bill were kind of annoyed at them, and then you were kind of annoyed with them, like them following you all the time. And then especially like in the third leg when they gave you information like uh, to catch like the shorter route to the pit stop or whatever, they're just using us because we speak other languages and we have more experience than them. And so where did that tension kind of start?
It started because we had this supposed alliance going into France. And so when we get to Paris, we're supposedly working together, but immediately Bill and Joe went off on their own. And then the same thing happened with Robin Brennan, is that we were, you have to get transportation for yourselves and your crew members. So you have to get transportation for 4 people, an audio and a video person. And so when we were getting ready to go to the pit stop in Paris, we were like, hey guys, we have to get 2 cabs, and they just grabbed the cab and left. So I was like, okay, so that's not much of an alliance. What kind of alliance is that? Like, what exactly is the alliance? Or we're working together, then all of a sudden you guys jump in a cab and disappear. Like, that's not cool. You know what I mean? So that's where it kind of started for me. I was like, well, they're not, the alliance is only when it's a benefit to them, but when they are ready to pop off and go and do their own thing, they had no issue doing it. So then I was like, kind of done with it at that point.
So after you finish in first, well, how disappointed were you in general? Obviously they get prizes now. How annoyed were you in general, like now in like the future seasons, that they get prizes and you can get jack squat?
Well, that is kind of crummy, but I will say that back then, Rosie O'Donnell had a talk show, and she invited us on her talk show. After the finale of the show, we went on her show, and she gave us a all expense paid trip to Hawaii for 2 weeks. I believe it was 2 weeks, nice. 10 days, something like that. So that was nice. It was kind of like a perk. So although I didn't win one on the show, Rosie O'Donnell actually gave us one that was pretty cool. So, I have no regrets. I mean, it was. There's things that I understand that the racers have to deal with now that we didn't. Like, we spent a lot of time in certain locations enjoying ourselves. Production had to figure out how to cut that face so to like race a lot harder. Whereas we, got to spend a night in Paris and hang out, and got to spend a few nights in Tunisia. It was really nice, so we kind of had an adventure and our own little vacation while we were going along.
Yeah, I think if I'm not mistaken, your film it usually only is like 3 weeks to a month filming, and I think yours was like 6 weeks if I'm not mistaken. So yours was maybe a little bit longer than the other ones. But after you finished in first from in the Italy leg, what was your rationale for going for the fast forward?
Well, I figured at that point, we could leave all the rest of the teams behind. And had it been just a few minutes earlier, like an hour earlier, we would have been gone. Like they wouldn't have been able to catch us because of because what was happening, as you probably saw, was that you get separated and everybody bunches up like in an airport, or bunches up at like a location that has an opening time of 8, 9 a.m. or whatever. So even if you got there at 6 p.m. the night before and it's closed, you still have to wait for the next day. So we went for the fast forward with the logic. Well, okay, if we can get out of this country and get to the next place and start, working on those tasks, we can leave everybody 24 hours behind us. And then at that point, we would have been caught. It would have been not much of a show. There's Frank and Margarita 24 hours ahead of everybody else. But
yeah, well, you're the first team to start a new leg where like another team isn't even done with the previous one. Like Nancy and Emily were like 14 hours behind y'all.
Right. Exactly. So that was just to just jump ahead. I mean, I mean, I get the ideal opportunity is when you're in first, you have an opportunity, like, make some space between you. But then one thing that it did do was it saved us from the real grind that
Yeah,
they had to do when they got to India. So that was a positive thing.
that was my next question. Like, how glad were you to just like get rid of like not have to do all that stuff? Like
Oh,
even like people saw like Nancy and Emily having to deal with like the sexist people in India, so you
oh
didn't
yeah,
have to deal with
yeah, yeah.
that. You didn't have to deal with like the crowded streets and not knowing
Hmm.
where you're going. Like, how was that as far as like not obviously you had to deal with that uh in the next leg for part of it, which I'll get to, but how was like looking back at it watching, how glad were you to avoid that and you were just like staying at a hotel
Yeah.
relaxing?
Right. We were well rested, looking at the Taj Mahal in the distance and the sunset, and eating dinner and just relaxing in India, and not knowing what the streets were like, because remember, we got there at night. We took a cab to the hotel, and so I mean, got to see a little bit, but we're on the main road, so you didn't really know what was going on in the in Delhi, in New Delhi, when they had to arrive and go through all those things they went through. We were just excited and relaxed and chilling. And then next thing you know, it's like when I saw what they had to go through when they told me, I was like, wow, I'm so glad we missed that. I'm so glad we missed that.
So talk about how annoying it, well, they kind of had to do this because otherwise there wouldn't be a show. When it was like you departed and the Taj Mahal opened like I don't know how many hours later, like a bunch, like you still had a
Right.
decent lead. But how annoyed were you with that? Because like now we see like all the time there's like equalizers and stuff like that. But I think like your season and maybe like season five were like the main ones where like some people didn't see teams for like 2, 3 days. So like how
Yeah.
annoyed like were you?
After a while, I thought everything became somewhat comical. Like I would laugh at it, because I'd say, oh, here we go again, bunching again. Like, you know, it was annoying at first, but then I figured, well, this is the pace of the game. So, might as well just enjoy whatever time we have now, enjoy the downtime, and then, as soon as we start racing again, have to deal with all the stress and the high energy. But, I took advantage of the downtimes, and, those things stopped annoying me. They just became funny.
After you get to India, you choose the rowboat. Honestly, I don't know which one I would have chose because I can't stand boats, so that would have been a disaster. But uh, were you nervous about doing the rowboat? Because like as far as getting in the fast forward, you had to get in a boat as well, and it seems like you guys were arguing with that. So were you kind of nervous doing that again? You were like, oh my god, it's deja vu. Like,
Oh yeah, I mean, but we ended up doing that everywhere we went. I mean, it was like we also did that later on, when every time we had to get into a boat. But what was more concerning was tipping over, falling in the water, or that kind of stuff. But it was fine.
so going to the ninth leg, was there anything that we didn't really get to see from you guys just because it was the whole Nancy, Emily, Joe, and Bill showdown, and obviously like with Joe and Bill and the taking the bus was a huge storyline because it screwed them later on and they could never catch up. So was there anything that we didn't get to see from uh, you guys
I
in
mean,
that you wish
that's
we
Thailand.
did? Yeah,
Thailand, right?
yeah.
Yeah, that was really weird, because I think we went 1,000 miles or so by taxi. Like, it's something that I think I mentioned, is like we were gonna look for a train or a bus, and Margarita's like, no, we should take a taxi, and I was like, that's impossible. Like, you can't just jump in a taxi from New York to Florida. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. And it was about that length of time. But no, I mean, Thailand is very nice, quiet. Um, at least that area that we were in was very peaceful. The food was very good. It was very clean. It was a stark contrast to India, which we had been in, and it was like chaotic. And so it was just, we were probably just relaxing most of the time. So it was good that you had the drama between Team Guido and Emily and Nancy, because they probably didn't have much to show from us except sleeping in a car for
Yeah.
so many hours, getting down to the south part of the country.
So how scary was doing that Tiger roadblock, or were you just like not really scared? Because I don't know how close they were to the actual thing, but I probably would have shit my pants if I had to do it
It
because
it was scary. It was. I mean, because it was what was scary about it was as we were driving up, you could hear the tigers roaring, and so it's kind of like in like a canyon, and you could hear the roaring tigers. And I'm like, well, what's going on here? And they're like, oh, you have to walk through. I mean, they luckily they were chained. They had chains on them. Um, but one came very, very close to me, and I didn't, I didn't panic and actually swiped at my legs and stuff. But yeah, I mean, they're wild animals. You can't be calm. I think I was super nervous, but I couldn't show it. But I mean, somebody saying they weren't nervous, I mean, they'd be lying because they're wild animals.
so how bad was it finding that car? Because we obviously saw that we obviously saw that like Nancy and Emily were kind of screwed in that, and that's why they got eliminated because they couldn't find the car. So like yeah, I would like love to speak to Emily, but nobody's like heard from her ever. Nobody knows where she is. But how bad was that? Just because we saw them like a complete disaster. I mean, you obviously had more options because you were like the second team there or whatever, and they were like the last, so they only had to find one
Mm.
car. But how like as far as like distance wise, like how bad was that area as far as like covering it, or was
It
it?
was a maze. I mean, I honestly just think we got lucky. I just, I had a gut feeling. I said, let's go this way, and just happened to have found it. Like, it was really just good fortune. I mean, it was a maze. I mean, you know, I don't know how, um, like I said, we got lucky. So I don't know what their experiences were. I saw it on TV, but I mean, it wouldn't have been easy.
Yeah, I'm shocked that they didn't switch. Were you even allowed to switch back then? Like, I just don't understand why they would just like give up.
Yeah, no, there was no switching, none of that stuff.
Oh, you couldn't switch. I didn't realize that because now you can be like I can switch. Like they never like
You mean like go back and choose the other one?
yeah because
Yeah,
now
yeah, you can do.
oh you can yeah. So I was
Yeah, but
like
you would have to go back to the original spot and then, original where you got the clue and then go to do the other option.
so were you like really pissed like that you realized like no offense to Nancy and Emily, they were kind of one of the I mean they made it far, but as far as like the top five, they were probably the weakest team there, and they somehow finish ahead of the Guidos. Like how shocked were you when you finished number two and like Rob and Brian were number one? Like what were you thinking? Like did you think the Guidos were getting another glass of champagne somewhere? Or
Well,
like
I knew they weren't. I knew they were stuck in Alaska. I knew that because we had known because we were asking our crew members, where everybody was, and they said, well, they're still back in Alaska.
oh, not the Alaska
Um,
roadblock, the Thailand one when they won the
oh,
fast forward, like, and you finished
and they couldn't get
second or whatever, and they were there like, what on earth were you thinking? Like, where are these people? And then
where
Nancy
are they?
won
Because
the
they got the fast forward.
fourth.
Right. Um, yeah, I mean, I was shocking because you figure if they got the fast forward, they're going to be ahead of you. You didn't think they would be messing that up, but one of the things that I did notice about them was that they spent a lot of money. They like to live the high life. So, as I said to you, when we were in places where you get there the night before, and the thing didn't open till the next day, they would go get a hotel room. They would go have a nice meal. So they were spending a lot of their money. Um, so that's why they ran out of money. Like whereas like we were very frugal. We kept all of our money. We spent as little as possible. We didn't. We slept in places that were not necessarily ideal, but we kept our money, and I think that's what really messed them up is they just couldn't afford a car.
You slept on a chair, like a what was it? Like the chair, like
Poolside.
sitting next to a pool. So like, yeah. So
It
there
was
was
like a 5-star hotel, and I was like, "Look, we're just gonna go sit and sleep poolside at the at the 5-star hotel.
yeah.
It beats being on the street and having to pay for a hotel." And they didn't bother us. They said, "Okay, yeah, no problem. We could stay on the at poolside here on one of the lounge chairs.
Yeah, so how hard was it climbing the cliff in Thailand? I mean, it looked like difficult in some sense, but it seemed like you had footholds. And I'm shocked that you guys uh, didn't do better because I feel like since like Margarita was the last girl standing as far as like climbing goes, I'm a good climber, and it's just because I'm like really light and kind of like skinny, and so I feel like you guys would do better just because like I feel like people who are lighter are better climbers. So
Right.
why was that so difficult?
It wasn't difficult for me. I mean, I got up there pretty quick. Um, I guess I don't know. I think she has a fear of heights to begin with, so I think that was a concern for her. And she just generally, was, has a somewhat nervous disposition, or at least back then had a nervous disposition. So I think she was somewhat afraid. I think it was the fear more than the difficulty because it wasn't really that hard.
Yeah, so after the climbing and the hiking in Thailand, which that obviously looked beautiful as far as like location wise, like it looked very like picturesque. But once again, you get the brunt of the roadblock where you have to kayak and she's just sitting on the kayak. So how bad was kayaking? Because that's one of the things that I'm least bad at, or I'm just terrible at it. I had bad experiences with it. So how bad was that? Like especially with the current and stuff, and you don't know where you're going.
Yeah.
You have to carry your luggage.
Yeah, it was frustrating because it was like you have all the luggage and then you have to figure out which way you're going, and then any drag, like, if you're just like laying back and your feet are in the water and you're enjoying the ride, it's like, no, please get your feet in the kayak, put your hands in the kayak. You're creating more drag for us, and so that's what led to somewhat of the arguing and stuff. But yeah, it's not easy. I mean, obviously, as you know, kayaking takes a lot of effort and strength, and then again with the added weight of all the bags and with the other person on there, so it was a little frustrating.
So after you finish the uh, Thailand leg, you and Robin Brennan are like ahead of the pack by like 24 hours. So then you go to China, which actually your leg in China didn't seem as dramatic as like I don't know if you still watch the race, but like in some seasons with like one team going to the bathroom before they hit the pit stop and then they get eliminated and you don't know where you're going, but like yours just seemed less dramatic in that sense. But you did have a huge argument with Margarita and yourself doing the roadblock, and he decided to eat all that disgusting like larvae and I don't know like what it was like chicken feed and all
Like
that.
beetle larvae, yeah.
Yeah. So was there anything that we didn't get to see like from that argument? Because obviously you guys were arguing, but she like still crushed it and kicked Robin Brennan's ass in that. So is there anything that we maybe didn't get to see, or like did you have any like rationale between like picking the roadblocks or anything? Like if it was physical, you would do it, and if it was something else, like she would, or
Oh, it's not like sort of. That's how we kind of were splitting them up, because right there I took more physical strength. Obviously, I did. I think what was it was more. I guess what was frustrating for me was more the attitude behind it. It was like, okay, I want to do the roadblock, and that's like, oh, this stuff is so gross. I don't want to do it, and why? Oh God, this is so bad. And it's like, well, just eat it. Let's get the hell out of here. Let's keep moving on the race, because that's what I would have done. I just shoved it down my mouth and kept going, But it was like now we have to sit there and contemplate how gross it is, and go through all those motions. So that's kind of what frustrated me, was like, if you choose to do it, just do it, and let's keep going. Like, let's not like talk through how gross it is. It's like it's obviously was going to be gross. That's what they marketed. It was going to be gross.
so since you're so competitive, I want to ask, what was it like? You had a 3-1 lead over that ping pong champion. You eventually complete it, but he like scores off like 8, 9 points or whatever, and he's kicking your ass. What was that like? You're like, oh, this is easy, and then he's just like kicking your butt.
Yeah, he's a little kid, but he was really great. And I was okay in ping pong. I'm not awesome, but I mean he was really, really, really good. And then I kind of got, he picked up the pace on me, and I was embarrassed because I mean, obviously he's a child and he's beating me. But then I kind of got his pace and caught up a little bit and finally got out of there. But I think Brendan had a much tougher
Oh
time.
yeah, they lost like 20. I think it was like 26 to like 5 or something.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was funny because I forget who, but one of them had like a broken hand, and the one with the broken hand scored like 4 to 5 points or whatever.
Right, right. Yeah, had like a cut on his hand or something. Yeah.
Yeah, so I bet you're glad because I don't know if you've seen this, but on I think it was like season 23 or something, they had the same challenge with like champions or whatever. Or I bet you were kind of frustrated because they used like the Amazing Race clue to hit the ping
Oh,
pong paddle and like frying pans and
oh,
like
damn.
tambourines and stuff like that. So I can only imagine like watching that in future being like, what the hell? Like why was ours so much harder?
I could see that. I could see that. I didn't know. I didn't see that one, but I could definitely relate.
Yeah, so after the you finish in first and you have like a little bit of a lead over Rob and Brennan, what kind of screwed you up on that roadblock? Because uh, you were like ahead of them by like 15 minutes, and then did you just not know where you were going? Like you said, like you wanted to do the steep one, but the flat, but you ended up at the flat one. So why didn't you just like go along the flat path or whatever? Or like what kind of screwed you up there?
This was at the Great Wall of China. You're talking
Yeah.
about? Yeah. What happened was where the bus dropped us off. It was up the hill from where the bus stop dropped us off. So we didn't know exactly where it was. So we got dropped off where we couldn't really see it until we're walking along a fence again, and I saw the base clue, and I jumped the fence, and communist China probably would have gotten arrested. But yeah, that we were confused because we didn't get to the entrance to the Great Wall. We ended up, um, going from down a hill somewhere where the bus dropped us off.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, you didn't pull a Colin, and you didn't get arrested from
Right.
season 5. There's only him, and then there was this one couple from the Amazing Race Australia, and they ended up like in, I think they were like in India, and they ended up like where the royal family was, and they were like going to. It was like this is a private area. Please don't like cross. And there was like a machine. There was like people with like machine guns, and they almost got like put in prison.
Oh Lord.
Somehow
Well,
they didn't.
thankfully that wasn't the
Yeah,
case.
somehow they didn't end up finishing last, but unfortunately there hasn't been that many arrests on the Amazing Race. So
Yeah.
uh, once you finish that roadblock, it tells you go to Alaska, and I found this really weird because your season was like the only season of Amazing Race where it's like you have a final leg, but you have like a leg in between for like the final 3 teams to like make up ground. Like, do you know why that was? Because that was like really weird. Like you
Yeah.
had,
No, I don't know. It was weird. Yeah.
yeah. How bad was Alaska like with the conditions? Because you obviously get to Alaska and it's freezing, and you're from New York, so I bet you're used to like the cold weather and whatever. But
Yeah.
they made you do interviews outside. Like, how bad was that? Because it seemed like a nightmare.
It actually wasn't as bad as I thought. Like we were staying in a musher's cabin and we had a fire, wood burning stove, so it was very hot in the cabin. And then at night, I actually went out on the snow, shirtless, and like walked around. It wasn't like super freezing cold, which I thought it would be. I mean, it was snow everywhere, but it wasn't like bitter cold. I was able to walk around. I mean, considering that I'd been in a hot cabin, but when I stepped outside, I was like marveling at like the stars and how really nice it was. So it wasn't as bitter cold as you would imagine.
So, what was it like? You obviously had some roadblocks and stuff to do in Alaska. What was it like just being tossed by a bunch of random people trying to find some weird thing? Like, I don't know if
That was funny because that was television magic. I don't know if you heard of that one, but some things happen in production that So the intent was to use this blanket to toss people. What we ended up doing was using a trampoline. So
oh,
that was a little different. than what it looked like on TV. So the editing was really good, but it was an actual trampoline that we had to jump on to see because I think the blanket was torn or something like that, so we couldn't use it.
Well, and like the people tossing you, they didn't look like too big, and you're like
Very
six
strong.
two and like pretty strong. And so I'm like, how the hell are they getting him up that high?
Exactly, you get the
And
point.
were you the only one to do it, or was Margarita the one to do it too? Because I'm like, why are they tossing you and not her when she's lighter?
Just me. It was me. Again, it was a roadblock, so you had to choose one person.
So after that, how frustrating was it in general? And I mean, maybe a good thing. Every time somebody would get ahead, you would get ahead of Robin Brennan, and then they would get ahead of you with all those equalizers happening then and not necessarily throughout the race. Or like, what was your thoughts on that?
Um, it, the fact that we kept going back and forth.
Like you kept going back and forth, but like every time somebody would get a lead, they would be like, "This place opens at like 8 a.m."
Oh,
or
yeah,
like,
yeah, the
or it
bunching.
was like bullshit. And then what really like what annoyed me as a viewer when you were driving to, I think it was that park or whatever, it was like closed, and then people were like, just ignore the close sign. And it's like, what is production's deal? Like, why don't you just like flip it or something like that? Like, I don't know how much time that cost you because they had to do the same thing, but
No, yeah, it was very frustrating. But like I said, after a while, I just started laughing about it because it happened every time, all the time. Like you couldn't really get. I mean, other than when we jumped out a very long lead ahead of the others, Robin Brennan and my team. Um, it was the same thing every time. Everywhere you went, it was just equalizing. This what I call bunching. It's like we're bunched back together again, and then you just there was no respite. It's like you just had to race as hard as you could all the time.
so how much fun and how annoying was it with you had to go on those sleigh dogs or whatever?
That was I don't know if I had a faulty sleigh or if I was too heavy for them, but I mean it was very bizarre. My dogs were just I think maybe there was one sled that maybe was they did that on purpose. Like one sled was not working very well because I wasn't I'm not that much heavier than let's say Rob, but my dogs just weren't running fast. They didn't seem well coordinated and stuff. So it was a very frustrating experience because then I started taking all my stuff off and then putting it in Margarita's sled, see if it was a weight issue, but that didn't fix it. It was pretty frustrating.
So you were able to actually make up some ground, but how bad or was that polar bear plunge roadblock for you to dive under the water that bad, or what was that like?
That was horrible. I mean, it was horrible. Like, I tell people to this day, it seems counterintuitive, but like you jump in water that's that cold, and you actually feel like you're on fire. Like you actually feel like somebody lit you on fire. That's how much pain you actually feel in your on your body. That was like the way my mind registered. It was like wow, like I literally feel like I'm on fire. Um, it was probably the most one of the most painful experiences I'd ever done
So I
experience.
literally just watched the final leg like 2 hours ago, just because I want it fresh in my mind. So you get the gift of a lifetime. You get the finish line in your hometown, like 6 blocks away from where you live. So you end up catching the same flight as Rob and Brennan. Uh, so what was your idea with the taxi directions? Because we saw you going over like the New Jersey Turnpike, which is one of my least favorite bridges of all time. That's a story for another day. But like, what was your, yeah, I have a mortal fear of bridges. But what was your whole rationale between like the directions, and why did it take your driver longer than Robin Brennan?
So a couple things that was obviously the biggest mistake we made on the race was first of all when we I think being from there is probably a disadvantage because we had knowledge about what we believe to be conditions in New York City, like going through Midtown, going through Manhattan at that time would be you know, there'd be a lot more traffic because Manhattan is full of traffic. But it was very early in the morning, but still that was a consideration because we knew that we were going through Manhattan. But prior to that, when we got off the plane, we jumped in a cab, and I don't think they showed this on the show. We jumped in a cab, and I said, "Oh, we're going to Queens," and he's like, "No, I'm not going to go to Queens." And so I'm arguing with the guy, and he's like, "No, I'm not going to Queens." So we had to get everything out of that
Yeah,
cab
they did show that
and
a
get into
little
another
bit.
cab.
There was like some guy, and I was like, "Why?" I'm like, "You took the taxi," and he was like, he was just standing there doing nothing, and so we didn't get to see
Right,
like the argument of like what actually happened, but he was just standing
right.
there, and so I was like, "Why is he not?"
Yeah, he refused to go because it was his last run of the day or something like that. So he didn't want to go all the way to Queens. So then we had to like unpack that cab and get to another cab, and that wasted a few minutes. And then we chose to go on the George Washington Bridge because that was, you know, what we considered less. Well, there would be less traffic because then we would bypass Manhattan altogether. Because when you're going from New Jersey to Queens, you have to go through Manhattan or around Manhattan. So we tried to go around Manhattan up through the Triborough Bridge, I believe it was, and then down into George Washington Bridge and Triborough Bridge and down
So how
into
close were
Queens. So
you?
you know,
And
we were really close. I mean, like Robin and Brennan were only a minute ahead of us or something like that. They jumped on a train 1 or 2 minutes ahead of us. So we were when we were running up the stairs, the train they were on was just leaving. It was just literally leaving.
yeah, so I want to talk about. I heard this from Kieran, but I'm not sure if this is true. So basically, they took a train, and what I heard there was production interference because the people that were at the end of the mat or whatever, like the final leg, they were on the next train or something.
No,
They were on the
no.
next or
So
they wouldn't let you
so
on.
my understanding was that Rob and Brendan were going to take the train in the wrong direction. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still there. I'm just listening.
So my understanding was that they were going to take the train in the wrong direction. So they were going to take the train to Manhattan. So when they're on the platform, standing there, getting ready to go to the train to Manhattan, they noticed the other people, the other production people, and the other racers that I guess they put there for decoys or something on the platform. So that made them recognize, oh wow, we have to be on that side of the platform to take the train in the other direction. So then that's when they went and changed directions because it was like, you know, production actually put them out there, and they figured it out by seeing the people from production. If not, they would have jumped on the train and gone to Manhattan, and we would have jumped on the other train and gone to Queens the way we were supposed to.
That's bullshit, to be honest with you.
It's pretty
Honestly,
corny.
I don't know. I think they do this now, but like, don't they just have like one camera? I'm not sure what they do now, but I assume they would just have like one camera person and one sound person, just like following you, like your own camera guy, and then like the other crew is like stationed at like wherever, uh, like the correct like markers are, and then they're responsible for filming like if you get lost. So like,
Yeah, I don't know what the logic was behind that. I just don't know why they did that. And it wasn't just the crew. It wasn't just cameras and stuff. It was other racers, I believe, that they had on the other platform.
yeah, that's what
Like people that had already.
it was like. Yeah, there was like other racers, and then something of like the fact like they they took the wrong train. They were going to take the wrong train, and then like you were supposed to take another train, and then there was like other people on the train, so they wouldn't let you on that train, and then you would take the train after that. So like, do you know like
That was the.
how close you were as far as like were you like 5 minutes behind them, and like did you think you won at some point? Because I think somebody told me before you saw them on the platform that they were like trying to hide them and everybody was cheering. So did you think that you won or like?
Right. I I did. I because it's so, you know, I didn't know and I wasn't gonna assume. I think Margarita thought that we won, but I wasn't gonna assume um, until we actually got there. Um, you know, my situation was that you both had to be on the platform to be winners, and they were both males, and they were going to outrun Margarita and I. I mean, I would have outrun them, but Margarita wouldn't have been able to outrun them. So if we were on the same train and we got into a uh, foot race, they would have won anyway. So if, you know, if we were that close, you know, Margarita wouldn't have been able to outrun them, and it was a long run. It would have probably been a mile. They would have to run, you know, pretty fast for the entire mile.
Yeah, you would have been the first. You would have been like, it would have been like Tara and Will, but season one.
Right, right,
But so
right.
just a couple more questions. Do you have any fun like pit stop stories? Like we obviously saw you in Songway Village, like partying it up, and that seemed pretty fun. But any cool pit stop stories? Because you said you stayed at them maybe a bit longer, or like any cool.
The funniest one I think was in India. We stayed in a Maharaja's palace, and we were there for a few days because we were so far ahead. Production still wasn't accustomed to us moving that fast, so we would get to a pit stop, and they'd say, "Okay, we got to put these guys up in a hotel or something, and let them, while we set up the next location." So we were in India for quite a few days, and we didn't get to travel, but I mean, it was a nice being at this Maharaja's palace. We would hang out on the roof deck and drink beer and all that stuff. So we would have a lot of fun, particularly Kevin and Drew. We'd make a lot of jokes. But then one of the funny things was that I found out Bill and Joe's. I found out Bill's last name, which is Bartek. So we were ordering all this stuff, and I said, "Just please put it on my tab. My name is Bill Bartek." So, so they kept putting everything. We were ordering cases of food. I mean, cases of beer and food and drinks and everything. And when they were getting ready to leave, they literally stopped them and were like, "Look, you owe all this money," and there was like this big issue with them because of the money situation, and we had a real kick out of that because
So what did they
they
do?
had like a ridiculous tab.
So what did they do after that? Did they make them pay the tab, or like did they ever?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure because we were gone by then. But yeah, that was funny. He's like,
So
yeah, just put on my tab. What's your name? Bill Bartek. Thank you.
yeah, we don't like you anyways, so we're gonna. Uh, so I forgot to ask this question. I don't know why. So your whole story plot with Margarita was like you're doing this for your relationship and you're doing this for your daughter, and then she talked about a lot. Her focus was like fixing the relationship, and your focus was kind of like just focused on winning the race and like if it works, it works. But when was kind of that turning point? Because we obviously saw you guys in the beginning kind of like arguing and having your ups and downs, like winning and doing well. But then I think it was towards the like right after you won the fast forward in India was kind of that turning point. But was it maybe earlier for you guys where like she kind of focused like now on winning the race, or like where was that kind of shift?
Yeah, I mean that kind of was kind of the issue, was on and off. Is like, that was one of the things that I wouldn't recommend people that are in romantic relationships that perhaps have communication issues and stuff to do something like this, because that stuff kept coming up. I mean, it just didn't end. It didn't end. There was more of a focus, but I mean that just wasn't a platform to work out marital issues or relationship issues. It's like you're on a race to win the race. You don't go to the Indy 500 and say I want to be on the phone with my wife the whole time. I'm trying to win the race. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
was focusing on the race, and I mean, at a certain point she did as well, but it never really went away. We had our differences and our difficulties, and so that's always a challenge.
So just a couple more questions and I'll let you go. So were you ever called for maybe like All Stars or any other race? Because we saw you on Amazing Race 25, like telling people like where to go, and then we saw you on Amazing Race season. Well, we didn't see you, but there was a letter like addressed to like Joe and Bill from you. So we've seen you as much as like I guess somebody without who hasn't returned. But were you like ever called maybe individually or
Well, they asked us to consider going back for All Star, but because Margaret and I are not in a relationship anymore, I didn't. That's not a wise idea. I don't want to go, and I don't think she did either. So
Oh, so you didn't swallow your pride and you didn't want to do
no,
the Eric and Danielle thing because they weren't dating and they
no,
ended up winning the season.
no.
Well, they said they were. Um, so I talked to Karen about it, and she said that she would want to race with you. I think they should make that team because that would be hilarious. Because Karen
No, not
is.
at all. You kind of breaking up a little bit.
Oh, I no, I'm talking about. So I when I interviewed Karen, she said that she would actually want to race with you because I asked her if she could race with anybody other than her partner. She picked you. So how do you think that would
I
go?
would pick her too.
I think that'd be great because you're both like really headstrong.
I would pick her too. Yeah, she's awesome. I mean, like I would, no doubt, we would win the race if Kara and I were a team. We would win,
I
hands down.
think you
With
would.
her intelligence and her drive and her strength and me being who I am, I think we'd make an outstanding team.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they don't do that. Like, who's the most headstrong team from this season, and who's the most
Right,
headstrong team from that season, and just put them together.
right.
But obviously, Nancy and Margaret or
Margareta.
Margareta, thank you, passed away. Do you have any good stories from your time with them? Maybe, if you don't mind answering that, or if you don't
Well,
want.
Nancy was just very sweet, salt of the earth, and so was Margareta. They were just very sweet, nice people. I mean, I really gave Dave and Margareta a lot of credit because they were older, but yet they raced really hard. And again, I don't know if production recognized how difficult, physically taxing it would be, but they were right there. They kept up, and they're just really really great people, and God rest their souls, and may they rest in peace. But those are just outstanding ladies, and I was very fortunate to have had that experience with them, and that'll live on forever. So they will live on in eternity in one way, and that's being pioneers on the Amazing Race, one of the most amazing shows in history.
Yeah, so just three more questions. So looking back at it, what was it like going to all those historical sites? I mean, you guys go to the Taj Mahal, Victoria Falls, Great Wall of China. Like, obviously, like you may not be able to like absorb it at the time, but looking back at it, like, how cool is that you got to like go to all those sites or whatever?
It's incredible. It's insane. Like I said, even to this day, I look back. And this is almost 20 years ago. My daughter is a senior now in college. She's about to graduate from Columbia University. So that was 20 years ago. She's going to be 21 next week. So it's amazing how time flies. But I look at whether it's TV or magazines or whatever, and I'm like, yeah, I was there. Like, yeah, I was there. That was
Yeah.
cool. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so it's really it's an incredible experience that you'll never forget.
Would your daughter do the race? Because I think that would be really funny if you guys raced just like the whole storyline in season one and be like, "Hey, I was one. I didn't even know what was going on, and now I'm a grown
I don't
adult."
know if she has the athleticism for that. She's I don't know if she's much more intellectual and on that front. I don't think she would do it. I'd ask her. I mean, but I doubt it. I think she's more of a if it was maybe Jeopardy, I think she would be jumping on it like no problem.
Yeah, that's why when I go on the race, because I'm not athletic other than like climbing and stuff, my partner told me he would carry me. So that's why my partner's going to be a 6'5", 240-pound like baseball player, and then good contrast from strength wise.
Yeah, you would definitely need to be carried.
Yeah, definitely. I don't run. But uh, so my last question is, I mean, you mentioned Karen, but is there anybody that you wish that you could maybe like go up against and race against, or like, is there anywhere that you wish that you could have gone that you didn't get to go, and where would you not want to go?
Yeah, I'd definitely like to get another shot at Robin Brennan. I would like to get another crack at Robin Brennan, race them again. I would like to race with somebody else. Like I said, Karen, that would be amazing. I would not want to go back to India, and somewhere that I would love to have gone was South America. Maybe down in Patagonia like that. I've never been to South America. I tried to go this year, but COVID shut that down. So
Yeah.
that was somewhere I would have liked to have gone, like maybe Brazil or something.
Well, that's all the questions that I have. Is there anything that I didn't mention that you want to talk about, or?
No, Connor, I thank you for this interview, and I'm glad that you're looking back to the historical beginning of the race, and I just want to say thanks to you and to everyone else that's still interested in
Yeah,
the
and
season.
thanks for this interview, and I'll definitely let you know when this is up.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Have
Thanks
a
a
nice
lot.
day.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.